I'm Alex. This is Code Along with Alex, and let's learn about imperative management of Kubernetes objects using configuration files. So to start, we're just going to dive right into Killer Coda, which is the Kubernetes playground I'm using today. There's other alternatives which are listed in the tutorial, which I will have linked in the video description. So kubectl tool supports three kinds of object management: imperative commands, imperative object configuration, and declarative object configuration. And so you can see the Kubernetes object management docs for a deeper discussion of the advantages and disadvantages of each kind of object management. But today, we're going to create some objects in the imperative style. So I can use kubectl create-f to create an object from a configuration file and refer to the Kubernetes API reference for more details. So that would be like file.yaml. And so updating objects with the replace command drops all parts of the spec not specified in the configuration file. This should be not used, or this should not be used with objects whose specs are partially managed by the cluster, such as services of type load balancer, where the external IP field is managed independently from the configuration file. Independently managed fields must be copied to the configuration file to prevent replace from dropping them. Okay, so you can also use kubectl replace-f to update a live object according to a configuration file. That would be like this. Nice. And then finally, you can also delete objects like this. And if the configuration file has specified the generate name field in the metadata section instead of the name field, you cannot delete the object using kubectl delete-f file name or URL. You'll have to use other flags for deleting the object. For example, you'd have to do something like this. Type name, where type is the type and name is the name. Next, you can also view an object using kubectl. Do that with kubectl get-f and the file name. And then you can output that in YAML format. And this will specify that the full object configuration is printed. And if you'd like to get more information about the options available, you can always run kubectl get and then pass the h flag. And then you'll get a nice bit of output to read through and learn more about this method. So there's some limitations. The create, replace, and delete commands work well when each object's configuration is fully defined and recorded in its configuration file. However, when a live object is updated and the updates are not merged into the configuration file, the updates will be lost the next time a replace is executed. No bueno. This can happen if a controller, such as a horizontal pod autoscaler, makes updates directly to a live object. Here's an example. Number 1, you create an object from a configuration file. 2, another source updates the object by changing some field. And then 3, you replace the object from the configuration file, but the changes made by the other source in step 2 are lost. If you need to support multiple writers to the same object, you can use kubectl apply to manage the object. There you go. And then you can get some information about kubectl apply. So creating and editing an object from a URL without saving the configuration. So suppose you have the URL of an object configuration file. This could be like a YAML in GitHub or wherever. You can use the kubectl create edit method, kubectl create -- edit to make changes to the configuration file before the object is created. This is particularly useful for tutorials and tasks that point to a configuration file that could be modified by the reader. So that would be done like this: kubectl create -f, and then whatever the URL is. Let's say it's some url.com/config.yaml, and then pass the edit flag, or edit option, excuse me. So what if you're thinking about migrating from imperative commands to imperative object creation or configuration, excuse me. So migrating from the imperative commands to imperative object configuration involves several manual steps. So to start, you'll need to export the live object to a local object configuration file. So you do that like this, like kubectl get, imagine it's a pod, and then maybe its name is dpod. We want the output in YAML, and let's save that into a file called pods dpod.yaml. And so we don't have any pods, but if we did, we could run this command. Let's actually check if we have any pods. kubectl get pods. We don't. That's cool. Next, after we would save that data into the YAML file, we'd manually remove the status field from the object configuration file. So you could do that with something like nano, and then you'd open pod.pod.yaml, and then you could edit that file as necessary. And then finally, we would run kubectl replace -f pod.pod.yaml. So this section has a disclaimer: updating selectors on controllers is strongly discouraged. So keep that in mind. But we're heading into the defining controller selectors and pod template labels. So the recommended approach is to define a single immutable pod template label used only by the controller selector with no other semantic meaning. So that would be in a YAML like this. Let's say recommended. We'll call it recommended.yaml. And let's open that with nano. So we put in selector. And this is missing some other required fields, but this is just the meat and potatoes of the controller selector information. So selector, match labels, controller, let's spell it right, selector, and then apps, v1, deployments, and Nginx, our old friend. And then next, we'd have a template, metadata, labels, ooh, my indentation is whack. Interesting. Maybe this needs to go in by 2. Labels. Apps, v1, deployment, and Nginx. Boom. So that's an example label. If you want to learn more about some of the topics we covered today, I encourage you to visit this link. Oops. Maybe this link. And these will be shared in the tutorial at the bottom. But yeah, I'm just copying and pasting them for fun. I hope this was helpful to you. It sure was for me. I'm Alex. This was Code Along with Alex, and I hope to see you next time. Have a great day.